Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from the USS Donald Cook in the Red Sea. Stealth bombers were also involved in the first attack. What followed was a dramatic but brief statement from Washington.
The opening stages of the disarmament of the Iraqi regime have begun.
Then the U.S. president went on TV around the world.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Reports suggest the target was Saddam Hussein himself and 4 other senior members of the Iraqi government. In an interview later, British Defense Secretary Jeff Hoon said there's more to come.
These are preliminary operations only, but certainly they are part of a wider campaign that will be underway in time.
To reassure the Iraqi public, the state-owned TV station immediately showed patriotic images of Saddam, then aired his speech.
Use your source.
It's unclear if it was pre-recorded or if Saddam was really injured in the attack. The declaration of war was watched back in the United States.
We need to take care of Saddam. We need to take care of Osama bin Laden. We need to get those people out of their lives.
I'm a little concerned about what's going on right now, and I think a lot of people are about to die tonight, and I'm really concerned about that.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of British and American troops are still massed in a forward position along the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border, waiting in the demilitarized zone for the order to push ahead with an invasion. British Prime Minister Tony Blair has not yet publicly spoken about the attack, but his office says he was told about it about 2 hours before it happened. Jolyn Shane, CBC News, London.
Iraqi officials say several civilians were injured during the U.S. attack on the capital. The regime allowed journalists into a central Baghdad hospital this morning. It says these people were hurt during the airstrikes. Iraq's information minister says the attacks killed 1 person and wounded several others. He told reporters the raids hit a customs office, Iraqi state television, and several suburbs of Baghdad. On the streets of Baghdad this morning, Iraqis are protesting against the invasion of their homeland. This group chanted pro-Saddam slogans. For the most part, though, the streets of Baghdad are empty. Most businesses are closed and traffic has all but disappeared. Meantime, one lone protester stood, padlocked to a tree outside the UN's Baghdad office. Britain's defense secretary had some words of warning for his country this morning. Geoffrey Hoon was speaking in the British Parliament.
People should treat with caution Iraq's claims of civilian casualties. The Iraqi people are not our enemies, and we are determined to do all we can to help them build the better future they deserve. Second, I would caution the House against suggestions that this campaign will be over in a very short time. We all certainly hope that offensive operations will be over quickly, but we should not underestimate the risks and difficulties that we may face against a regime that is the embodiment of absolute ruthlessness with an utter disregard for human life.
British Defense Secretary Geoffrey Hoon speaking in the House of Commons. Watching all of this with all of us is the CBC's Harry Forrestal, who is in London. He joins us now with more. Hoon spoke this morning. Also, the British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw. The message, though, is now, I mean, it's being delivered obviously by those other than Tony Blair, but essentially the message hasn't changed much.
It hasn't, Alison. There is really a two-pronged approach here. The U.S. clearly playing the role of the muscle man in this and leading the military attack, while Britain is trying to put a more compassionate face on what is happening here. Now, we just heard Geoffrey Hoon. He also said that British forces are currently engaged in this conflict in Iraq. But then attention focused on Jack Straw, the foreign minister, who spoke to the people of Iraq directly in his press conference conference today. He said, "We were left no option but to use force," and went on to say, "We are with you." To the people of Iraq, we are with you, we support you, we want to see your suffering come to an end. And then he went on to explain that Britain's one key priority for Britain right now is to create some agreement among UN nations and European nations for a reconstruction program for Iraq that will fall into place after this military campaign is over. So Geoffrey Hoon and Admiral Sir Michael Boyce, the Chief of Defence Staff, met with Tony Blair in a War Cabinet meeting this morning. It was a fairly short meeting. Tony Blair then had a subsequent meeting with his full cabinet. We didn't get a lot of information from that, but there has been some considerable debate, Allison, on how quickly the British knew about this morning's attack on Baghdad. Now, Geoffrey Hoon says that he had full foreknowledge that the attack was coming. Tony Blair, it isn't clear just how much foreknowledge he had. He was told after midnight. We were told a couple of hours before the attack. But of course, things work differently here. The Prime Minister is not the commander-in-chief of the military forces per se, as George Bush is, so it wouldn't be unusual for him to be told a little later on of some events.
Now, Blair, of course, is on his way to Europe to meet with European leaders. Obviously, this is going to be an issue that dominates their discussions as well.
No question. And one of the things that we're being told, Geoff Hoon had mentioned that Tony Blair would make a televised address to the nation, but only when there had been substantive involvement of British troops in this campaign. Now, a clue to how long that might take is this. He's going to Europe this afternoon. He's going to be there this evening and most of tomorrow to meet with other EU leaders. So we can assume that over the next day and a half, we're not going to hear from Tony Blair, because Foreign Office sources are saying to us he wants to be in the UK when he makes that address. We shouldn't expect him to make any statement regarding to the population of the UK regarding the involvement in Iraq until he is back in the UK. So I think we can expect to wait at least a day and a half for that. Meanwhile, yes, he's talking to European heads of state, trying to garner support for a reconstruction program in Iraq, because of course the United States and the United Kingdom don't want to be saddled with the rebuilding of Iraq alone. They want some help, and they're hoping to reunify the European Union and the UN to help them do that.
Thank you for this, Harry. The CBC's Harry Forrestal reporting to us from London. Well, from Washington, the CBC's Henry Champ is covering this story for us now, and he joins us live as well. Well, Henry, you pointed out earlier this morning that the U.S. president was in his office almost as early as those of us who do morning television. Give us a sense of, after a long night last night, and obviously a very sober and serious decision to be made, what the atmosphere is like in those circles this morning.
Well, first of all, let me give you the exact time, since they are very precise about it at the White House. 6 minutes after 5 was when the president arrived on the job. That's a lot earlier than normal, but you can imagine his excitement and interest in seeing what had gone on overnight. He was briefed, of course, immediately by Condoleezza Rice and other officials at the National Security Council. On the mood, I can tell you that everyone I have spoken to this morning, and that's largely at the White House and the Pentagon, are ebullient about what has gone on. The attack on Saddam Hussein failed in its final success, which was, of course, to be his death. But they take great glee in the pictures that they've seen where Saddam Hussein looks gaunt, is wearing glasses, appears pale, to use the words that they're suggesting. And they believe that he got a pretty significant appreciation of what kind of surveillance is available. Also, they believe they've scored a significant psychological effect on the leadership of Saddam Hussein, not only just the Hussein and his family, but many other key people, certainly now aware that the surveillance of the CIA is far more sophisticated than they may have thought. Later this morning, and that will come at 11 o'clock, Donald Rumsfeld and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Richard Meyer, will conduct a briefing at the Pentagon. I'm sure that they'll make every effort to be subdued and whatever, but I think they're going to enjoy telling their story, which will deal with that issue. But there's also another story that they're going to talk about too, and that deals with this helicopter that crashed. It's the first loss of an aircraft in this incident. That aircraft crashed apparently in a rather dangerous area in South Iraq. Other helicopters raced to its aid and managed to get the people on board extracted from the area, and then they went back and totally destroyed the helicopter so there could be no advantage to people on the ground, and I'm sure we're going to hear about that as well. It is a catalog of events, and it's going to be told, I think, with a good deal of pride, because there haven't been many negatives yet this morning. Allison.
Thanks very much for this, Henry. The CBC's Henry Champ reporting to us from Washington, and of course we'll bring you all of that information that Henry spoke about live as it unfolds. Here at home, the Prime Minister has not commented on the U.S. attacks yet. He is expected to speak with reporters later this morning. That's at 9:45 Eastern Time, just about half an hour from now. Newsworld will have that for you live as well. Also, Canadian Alliance leader Stephen Harper will make a speech on the Iraq situation today. Tory leader Joe Clark is not planning to comment. Jack Layton, the leader of the NDP, told the nation last night what he thinks. Just hours after the attack, Layton called on Canadians to protest across the country. Security officials in the United States have put the country on orange alert. That is the second highest step, and it means officials at all entry points are taking much more care than usual to check out travelers and the goods they're carrying with them. Rosa Marcatelli joins us now live from the main border crossing for commercial traffic in British Columbia. Describe the situation at that border crossing, Rosa.
Well, Alison, it's still quite early in this part of the country, but
Very
already
early.
The truck lineups, it's, well, pretty early for us, yeah. The truck lineups are already quite long. They're about 1 kilometer long at this point, but that is considerably shorter than it was yesterday afternoon. A lot of these truckers were waiting 2 to 4 hours to get across the border to the United States.
Do you know anything about the kinds of checks that are being performed?
Well, as you said, Alison, because this is the orange alert for the United States, the second highest, they're telling us that they are asking way more questions than they normally would. They are doing more stringent ID checks, and that they're also doing more thorough inspections. You can expect to wait so long because each vehicle that goes through, or a lot of vehicles that go through, are pulled over and checked thoroughly.
And of course, Canadian customs officials are doing random checks as well. So does that mean that some of these truckers are going through too?
Right, and one gentleman that I spoke with earlier today crosses the border every day back and forth, so he's been undergoing a lot of checks. And the Canadian officials are also on a heightened sense of alert, and they're also doing the same sort of checks. As I said, more ID checks, more inspections, and they're asking more questions.
What's the mood among those who are having to wait?
Well, it depends who you ask. A lot of these truckers are taking it in stride, but I mean, the wait for them is money. A lot of these guys are paid by the kilometer or mile, depending on which side of the border you're from. So the longer they wait, the more money they lose, and some are getting frustrated at this point.
Is there any suggestion about how they hope to deal with that kind of backlog?
Well, authorities are saying right now you'll just have to be patient, and as things escalate in Iraq, we could expect longer waits. Right now, for example, Allison, it's been pretty easy going for passenger traffic. They've been going through the border quite quickly, but they expect that to change as well, especially if things escalate. For example, if there is a localized threat or even a terrorist attack on Canadian or American soil.
Thanks very much for this, Rosa. The CBC's Rosa Marcatelli from a major border crossing point in British Columbia. Coming up next, we're going to explore a little more of the political mood in Washington as we enter this second day of the American assault on Iraq. Stay with us as our special coverage of the attack on Iraq continues. Kuwait comes under attack from 4 Iraqi missiles. Officials say 3 exploded without causing damage or injury. The 4th was shot down by a Patriot anti-missile battery. Saddam Hussein appears on television to show he survived the American cruise missile attack aimed at killing him and other top Iraqi leaders. He calls the U.S.-led war a criminal act and urged Iraqis to draw swords against the enemy. And Iraq claims last night's attacks killed 1 person and wounded several others. The country's information minister says the missiles hit a customs office, empty buildings used by Iraqi television, and 3 suburbs around Baghdad. The war is being fought in Iraq, of course, but the order to begin it came from Washington. To get more on the political mood there, I'm joined this morning from Capitol Hill by Chris Shays, a Republican representative of Congress from Connecticut. Mr. Shays, sometimes, I suppose, in the cold light of day, people think pretty carefully about how they're feeling about events like these. How are you viewing the events that we've watched over the last 12 hours or so?
Well, no member of Congress feels comfortable knowing that they've sent men and women into battle. It does kind of take your breath away, and with modern technology, seeing the actions, you know, it gives you